Hi, this is Katrina Steingrabe. I am Autism and Behavior Training and Consultation with the Intermediate Unit 1. Today we're going to talk about positive behavior support for paraprofessionals. As a regional educational agency, the Intermediate Unit strives to provide educational support to the students, parents, educators, school administrators, and the communities throughout southwestern Pennsylvania. As a rule of thumb, your district's policies regarding your job descriptions, duties, and responsibilities will provide the final word. As we're discussing the different topics today, keep in mind that your district's policies regarding your job descriptions, duties, and responsibilities provide the final word. Pennsylvania is committed to least restrictive environment. This means recognizing that the placement decision is an IEP team decision, with our goal being for each child to ensure the IEP team begins with the general education setting with use of supplemental aids and services before considering a more restrictive environment. As we begin, we're going to look at the definition of behavior for the students we serve. The definition of behavior has two parts. Behavior is any observable and measurable action. This can be academic or functional. Behavior is also the aggregate of responses to stimuli. This can be internal or external. Looking at part one of the behavior definition, we need to really discuss what observable and measurable mean. Behavior is observable. This means we can see it, hear it, and or feel it. Some examples of observable behavior are screams, hits, scribbles on paper, puts down head on desk. Behavior must also be measurable. This means that we can count it in some way. Types of counts we use to measure behavior are frequency, duration, latency, and count only. Frequency gives us a rate. This means how many times something occurs over a given amount of time. Duration means how long does something last. Latency is the time it takes from one event to happen till something else occurs. Latency, I usually explain, is giving a student wait time. You call them to the table, how long does it take for them to come to the table? And then count only is exactly that, is how many times did a behavior occur. Functional behaviors are those related to students' abilities to be successful in the school, home, or community environments. These behaviors would fall into skill areas like toileting, appropriate social behaviors and student behaviors, telling time, reading labels and signs, communications, and so on. Behaviors can also be academic in nature. Academic behaviors are those related to the curriculum and standards being used within the district. Behaviors that would fall under these skill areas, for example, would be academic. This means decoding words, calculating an answer to a math problem, identifying vocabulary in science, sequencing events in history, and counting coins, and so on. Take a look at handout number 1. This is your ABC chart. You're going to group together and discuss some common behaviors in your classroom with your neighbors and write them in the behavior column of your handout. Make sure when you're listing these behaviors that they are observable, meaning you can see, feel, hear them, and measurable, which means you can count them specifically in some way. Pause the video for handout completion. Next, we will watch a video. As we watch the video, I want you to focus in on the specific observable, measurable behaviors that you see. Write them down as you watch the video.
Your shoes, Natasha. This man is watching him. Ooh, he's got a nun. He's got a nun. He needs a nun.
The second part of our behavior definition focuses on the aggregate of responses to stimuli, whether they're internal or external. We need to remember with behavior that all behavior has a function or a purpose. All behavior is learned, and all behavior is a response to the environment. When we think about the functions of behaviors, I want you to remember the acronym M.E.A.T.S. The different functions of behavior include medical, escape, attention, tangible, or sensory. When we talk about medical functions of behavior, the behavior meets some kind of medical need. If a student falls asleep in class because they didn't sleep the night before, falling asleep in class has the function of giving the body rest. It's a medical need. Escape means they are trying to escape either a task or a person or something in the environment. That would be the escape function. The function of attention means the student is gaining some kind of attention, either from peers or adults in the room. Tangible is just that. The student receives something, gets some kind of tangible item when they exhibit the behavior. And then finally, sensory. The behavior may be meeting some kind of sensory need the student has. Think back to the video that we just watched. What do you think the function of the behavior could be based on the behaviors we observed? Pause the video for discussion. Let's take a look at our ABC chart again. What functions do you think your students' behaviors have? Discuss it briefly with your peers around you. Pause for completion. Next, we'll discuss antecedents. Antecedents influence the behavior and responses of our students. How our classrooms and schedules are arranged and how we interact with students can serve as an antecedent or trigger to their behaviors. In this next section, we'll talk a lot about different antecedent factors that may trigger or bring about desired behaviors or unwanted, challenging behaviors. Antecedent stimuli include environmental, temporal, physical or medical, task, presentation, instructor, or instruction. When we talk about environmental variables, these are things like the furniture in the room, the decor on the walls, the noise level, the temperature, and things like lighting. Temporal variables refer to time. This could be specific to the time of day, how much wait time you give a student, the start and stop time of an activity, or transition time throughout the day in their activities. Physical and medical variables include hunger, allergies, medications, medical side effects, and stimulations such as clothing tags. Task variables can encompass materials, activity pace, length of task, the partners that the students are paired with, or the complexity of the activity. It may be too hard, it may be too easy. Presentation variables include the type of instruction, the complexity of presentation, and the types of cues given during the presentation. Instructor variables include tone of voice, disposition and attitude towards the student, and consistency of expectation. Instruction variables include skill deficits and possibly lack of prior knowledge. Another antecedent stimuli is instruction itself. If a student demonstrates problem behaviors due to a specific skill deficit, such as an academic, social, or communication skill, teaching the missing skills becomes that much more important. Students will no longer need to display the problem behavior once he or she has learned the missing skill. Take a look again at your ABC chart handout. In your groups, discuss and list the antecedents for the behaviors you listed earlier. Pause the video for completion. Next, we'll discuss consequences. Consequences are stimuli in the environment that happen directly after the behavior of concern occurs. Consequences can be good or bad, expected or unexpected. What's really important is we need to pay close attention to what do the adults do, what do the other students do, and what does the specific child do. Take a look again at your handout. Think about what actually happens immediately after the behavior occurs. Go ahead and write the consequences in the consequence column of your sheet. Pause for completion. Consequences can be considered reinforcement or punishment. Consequences can be categorized into reinforcement or punishment. Reinforcement is anything that occurs after the behavior that causes the behavior to maintain or increase. This can be positive or negative. Punishment is anything that occurs after the behavior that causes the behavior to decrease or be eliminated. Again, this can also be positive or negative. Reinforcement, again, maintains or increases the behavior. If it is positive reinforcement, something is being added. Think plus sign, positive. Something's being added to the situation that maintains or increases the behavior. Negative reinforcement means something is being taken away, subtracted from the situation that maintains or increases the behavior. Think about positive and negative reinforcement on a number line. Negative reinforcement is taking something away from the environment to increase the behavior. For example, driving in a car and the bell is dinging for you to put the seatbelt on. You get annoyed and put it on and the bell stops. The bell was taken away and it increased the likelihood of you putting on your seatbelt. Negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is adding something to the environment to increase or maintain the behavior. For example, Jennifer asks her dad for $20 to go to the movies. Her dad gives her $20 to go to the movies with her friends. Next time, she asks for $30. Her dad added $20, which increased the likelihood of her asking for money again. When we talk about punishment, punishment specifically decreases the behavior. Again, this can be positive, adding something to the situation, or negative, taking something away from the situation. If we look at positive and negative punishment on our number line example, negative punishment takes away something from the environment to decrease the behavior. Positive punishment adds something to the environment to decrease the behavior. For example, your cell phone rings during a presentation and your boss scolds you in front of your peers. A scold was added. The likelihood of your cell phone going off during a presentation decreases. A consequence can only be sorted into punishment or reinforcement after we see what it does to the behavior. What motivates one child might be punishment to another one. If the behavior increases, then it's reinforcement. If the behavior decreases, then it's punishment. We can use the functions of behavior to predict what might happen to behavior. We can also use historical data to document what happened to the behavior previously and use that as in our instructional decisions moving forward. Next, I'll give you a scenario, and you will need to make a decision about whether or not the consequence is positive punishment, negative punishment, positive reinforcement, or negative reinforcement. Remember, positive means you're adding something. Negative means you're taking something away. Punishment decreases behavior. Reinforcement maintains or increases behavior. Scenario 1. A loud buzz sounds in some cars when the ignition key is turned on. The driver puts on a safety belt in order to eliminate the irritating buzz. Next time the driver enters the car, he or she immediately puts on the seat belt. Pause for discussion. Negative reinforcement. Scenario 2. The student wears his favorite baseball cap to school. When the student gets to class, he or she is reprimanded by the teacher. The student leaves the favorite hat at home. Pause for discussion. Positive punishment. Scenario 3. Student has a hard time completing writing assignments. The student begins a writing assignment. The teacher gives him a goldfish cracker. Student completes the writing assignments more often. Pause for discussion. Positive reinforcement. Scenario 4. Mom wants the child to clean the bedroom. Mom begins nagging endlessly when the child gets home from school to clean the room. The child begins cleaning the room and the nagging stops. The child continues to clean the rest of the room. Pause for discussion. Negative reinforcement. Scenario 5. A child gets a bad grade on a test. The parent takes the child's cell phone. On the next quiz, the child gets a B. Pause for discussion. Negative punishment. Scenario 6. A husband is snoring really loud. The wife puts earplugs in and is able to sleep. The wife starts putting earplugs in every night right when she lays down to go to sleep. Pause for discussion. Positive reinforcement. Scenario 7. You're late for work and you drive over the speed limit. Police officer pulls you over and you get a ticket. The rest of the week you drive the speed limit. Pause for discussion. Positive punishment. Scenario 8. Two students get into a fight over who is going first when playing a board game. The teacher takes away the game. Next time students play the board game, they are very polite and play according to the rules. Pause for discussion. Negative punishment. Take a look back at your handout. In your groups, discuss the consequences you listed earlier. Do you think your consequences are reinforcement or punishment? Pause for completion. Punishment strategies are necessary sometimes to decrease undesirable behaviors. There should be a replacement behavior that we reinforce every time that we use a punishment strategy to decrease behavior. This pairing of punishment strategies with reinforcement strategies is called fair pair. Extinction is a common punishment strategy used to decrease behavior that was previously reinforced by withholding reinforcement to decrease behavior. An example of extinction of an extinction strategy would be planned ignoring. You're withholding attention. According to IDEA Chapter 14, you can not only use punishment strategies to decrease behavior. If you are decreasing a behavior, you must also use a reinforcement strategy to increase a replacement behavior. If you only use punishment, you will find yourself in a cycle where you need to use more and more punishment to get the same effect. This is very hard to fade, and it does not teach replacement behaviors. Likewise, in your classroom, you should be trying to follow a 4-to-1 positive versus negative ratio. Take a look at your ABC chart. Look under your behavior column. What is the replacement behavior that you could teach and reinforce for the negative behaviors you're trying to extinguish? Pause for completion. Next, we will be talking about positive behavior support. We'll look at the RTI model, general antecedent prevention strategies, and individual antecedent prevention strategies. Positive behavior support is evidence-based preventative behavior management system. It creates a safe, pleasant learning environment and focuses on identifying factors that maintain problem behavior, then changing elements of the environment to create a behavior change. When we look at the RTI, response to intervention, model for behavior, it is broken into 3 tiers. Tier 1 encompasses 100% of the student population. All students receive these interventions. They are preventative and proactive and are considered common classroom management techniques. Tier 2 is 5 to 10% of the student population. These are students that may need a little more support than just the general classroom management. They may need reward systems, possibly a check in and out, and a little bit of individualization. Tier 3 is your 1 to 5% of your student population. These are your students with IEPs. They require frequent data collection, intensive interventions, possibly a functional behavior assessment, and positive behavior support plans. Take a look at Mr. Thompson's class. Is this how your class looks? Sometimes we feel like our class looks like Miss Millie's class. It seems as though you have more red than yellow. If this is the case, then you need to increase the intermittent reinforcers and focus on implementing more Tier 1 strategies in order to move those red students into the yellow category. This is also a sign that you may need to strengthen your classroom management system to increase the amount of green kids that you have. We're going to look at general antecedent prevention strategies now. These will encompass Latham's tools, a toolbox for teachers, behavior-specific contingent praise, and reinforcement strategies. Latham's tools for positive behavior change are best practice overall classroom management strategies. These strategies assist in creating a positive learning environment for all, students and staff alike. The first Latham's tool is staying close. Staying close establishes a safe and positive environment. It basically means you move close in proximity to the students when they're displaying problem behaviors. For example, if a student is tapping their pencil, the teacher simply walks close to the student, does not look at them, but just stays close, and the student may stop tapping the pencil. Giving positive consequences for desired behaviors is the next Latham's tool. This is basically, you see a behavior you like and you acknowledge it. You want to be very behavior specific when you give your praise. The next Latham's tool is ignoring junk behaviors. It is extremely important to remember that junk behaviors include any behavior that is age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, and does not directly harm the student or anyone else, but may be very annoying. It's important to remember to pick your battles with junk behavior. You really want to focus on reinforcing what you want to see. The next Latham's tool is ignoring junk behaviors of one person and giving positive consequences for the appropriate behaviors of another. When you ignore the junk behavior of an annoying but not harmful behavior, you praise everyone else who is exhibiting the appropriate behavior. When the appropriate behavior is exhibited by the student, then you praise them too. It's very important to come back, and once that student is exhibiting the behavior you would like to see, you want to praise them too. Stop, redirect, and give positive consequences. This is when we interrupt the student's behavior with a redirection to an incompatible behavior, and then reinforce it by giving positive consequences. For example, if a student is pounding on their desk, you would stop that behavior and interrupt it by redirecting the student to passing out papers or possibly sharpening pencils. Could you help me out and do this for me, please? Then you would reinforce when they comply with that behavior. Setting expectation. This means clearly letting the students know what is expected in all environments. An example of this is school-wide positive behavior support. An important piece of setting expectation is reviewing the expectations frequently. Students know what consequences are for meeting or not meeting the expectations because they are implemented consistently. Using a contract. When you use a contract, this is a written agreement with the person that identifies positive expectations and consequences. It can be used in elementary or secondary, and it aligns to self-monitoring. It turns the tables on the student to hold them responsible for their own actions. Time out. Time out is not putting kids in the chair or a corner. It is only considered a time out if you are removing reinforcement from the student when the behavior occurs. Timeout is used as an interruption of out-of-control behavior only if the out-of-control behavior is occurring during a preferred reinforcing activity. The interruption makes sure the student is safe, gives them wait time to calm, and it's important to remember that no verbal or physical redirections should be given during a timeout. Latham's tools also encompass the ABCs of assessing behavior. This means identifying the antecedents, defining specifically the behaviors, identifying the consequences, and then making a plan to change the environmental stimuli. The last Latham's tools is consulting the skills of staff. Remember, you're not the only one in your buildings. It's important that if you need suggestions, that you ask for strategies. Guidance counselors, teachers, principals, school nurses, behavior specialists, parents are all people that may be able to help give you some fresh ideas. Next, we'll talk about behavior-specific contingent praise. Behavior-specific contingent praise is directly linked to the targeted behavior. The praise only occurs when the behavior occurs. Behavior-specific praise tells about the desired behavior. As a rule, again, for every one negative behavior you point out, you should be acknowledging 4 positive, desirable behaviors. We're going to look at reinforcement schedules. We're going to talk about random, continuous, and structured schedules. A random reinforcement schedule is basically that. You're catching a student being good. You observe the students and you reinforce when the desired behavior occurs. You do not reinforce when the undesirable behaviors occur. You want to make sure you're ignoring when those undesirable behaviors occur. Reinforcement does not occur every time the desired behavior occurs. It is random. Continuous reinforcement is a one-to-one ratio of behavior to reinforcement. Every single time a behavior occurs, reinforcement is delivered. So, when we're using continuous reinforcement, we observe the students, the desired behavior occurs, and reinforcement is delivered. If undesirable behavior occurs, it is not reinforced, it is ignored. Usually we use continuous reinforcement with a student that may have a one-on-one because it is a high rate of reinforcement and it's very difficult to reinforce every time the behavior occurs. The last type of reinforcement schedule we'll discuss is structured. This is just basically setting the expectations. Similar to a behavior contract, there are two components. The expectation, this is what does the student have to do and how well, and the reinforcer, what reinforcer will be given. A group reward system is contingent upon predetermined criteria, reinforcement that all students receive at a specific time. A group reward system is important to remember that the class may earn the reward even if all the students are not exhibiting the targeted behavior. They still gain access to that reinforcement. Now we'll discuss individual antecedent prevention strategies, such as self-monitoring and behavior contracts. Self-monitoring charts monitors the targeted behaviors. They allow students to utilize a sheet to track their own behavior. An example also of this would be a student using a Post-it note in the corner of their desk to track how many times they raise their hand to answer a question during a specific lesson. Here are some examples of self-monitoring charts. The one on the left could be used in an elementary classroom. The one on the right is for middle school or high school. Behavior contracts are specific to replacement behaviors that we want to see. Behavior contracts place contingencies for reinforcement. Here are some examples. Again, the one on the left could be used in the elementary school, and the one on the right in the high school, middle school setting. These contracts specify exactly what behavior needs to be displayed and what consequences the student will receive should they display those behaviors. Individual point sheets are directly linked to a behavior contract. They can be daily or per class. They specifically address behavior or behaviors of concern by giving points for replacement behaviors. The points earn them rewards according to what is specified in a behavior contract. Here's an example of a student point sheet. As we wrap up, it is important to remember that the only behavior we can truly control is our own. I leave you with this quote from Latham: "Unless what you are about to say or do has a high probability of making things better, don't say or do it." Please now take the time to complete the post survey from our presentation. Pause for completion.